But we are going to turn now to some breaking political news that happened just before airtime, and that is that the anonymous source behind the Globe and Mail's reporting on Beijing's alleged election meddling is speaking out. Now, it's important to note the identity of the individual remains unknown to us, but is known to the Globe and Mail, and the Globe continues to grant this national security official anonymity. In an opinion piece published in the last hour, the official says it was a lack of serious action by top government officials on the issue of foreign interference that led this official to leak top-secret documents and speak to journalists. The piece reads in part, "I hope that by providing the public with information I believe to be in the interest of all Canadians, we as a country would begin a much deeper conversation about what it is that we expect of our government. And while I still believe that conversation to be necessary, it has unfortunately become marked by ugliness and division. So let me be clear. As troubling as the revelations we have seen are, I do not believe that foreign interference dictated the present composition of our federal government, nor do I believe that any of our elected leaders is a traitor to our country." Okay, here to dig into this story. Taleeb Noormohamed is a BC Liberal Member of Parliament. René, Villemure is a Bloc Québécois MP, and Rachel Blaney is a British Columbia NDP MP. We've been asking the Conservatives for several days to join us for this conversation, but no member of their caucus has made available. So, Mr. Noormohamed, I want to start with you. The national security official describes himself as a whistleblower. The Globe says this person is the backbone of the reporting. They said they felt compelled to speak to Canadian journalists after years of inaction by top government officials. Has this government failed to keep Canadians safe from foreign interference based on this warning?
Well, David, first I want to begin by offering my condolences to the families of the two police officers at Edmonton. I think it's important for us to all think of them and their families in this time. You know, that's of course a terrible tragedy, and our hearts are with them. When it comes to the story and what you've just shared, I think first of all, it's important for Canadians to hear the last part of what you said, that just as the whistleblower, just as opposition leaders, and just as the Prime Minister has said, the outcome of the election in 2021, the outcome of the 2019 elections were safe and secure and decided by Canadians and Canadians only. So I think it's important to preface any conversation with that. Since these allegations have been raised, we've known about this attempted interference for some time, which is why after the 2015 election, our government put in place the processes around ensuring that these elections were monitored and safe and secure. And this is why the panel of public servants was put together in response to the first allegations that we heard. The protocol report on the 2019 election, it was Jim Judd, the former director of CSIS, that led that panel. After 2021, it was Maurice Rosenberg who led that panel. Both those individuals indicated the elections were indeed handled safely and securely. Now, that doesn't mean we can't do more. Right. And so what's been done, of course, as you've seen, is, of course, NCIRA and NSICOP, the two top-secret cleared bodies, are looking into this. And, of course, now we have the special rapporteur.
But we have right here in the first page of this opinion piece, another federal election had come and gone, the threat of interference had grown, and it had become increasingly clear that no serious action was being considered. Worse still, evidence of senior public officials ignoring interference was beginning to mount. What's your reaction to that?
Well, first of all, I think we should point to the work that was done, right? And so we know that there were things that were already in place in panels that were reporting. Second of all, this is the opinion of this individual, but it is an important conversation for us to have. I mean, this is an indication that, like many of us, there are concerns about ensuring that our democracy remains safe and secure. And so I don't agree with the methodology that this individual has taken. I don't believe that this is how one should treat national security materials, but I understand the importance of the conversation, and I respect the importance of the conversation, which we need to have, we need to dig into. We now have 3 processes underway to do that, and the special rapporteur is going to make recommendations. Whatever those recommendations are, our government is going to accept.
Mr. Villemure, what's your reaction to the claims and the revelations made here by the whistleblower who says, in speaking to journalists, they ask themselves some key questions. Can I do this while mitigating the risk to our country's sources and methods? Will this mean the end of my career? And who will take care of my family if I go to prison? What's your reaction to this latest revelation in the Globe? Oh, sorry, Mr. Villemure, I believe you're muted there on your end. We can't hear a word you're saying. If you can just, it's
okay,
like being at committee.
Sorry.
It's like being at committee. That's all right. Go ahead, sir.
Right on. Well, being a whistleblower is a hard decision to take, first of all, and there are many risks, and it's something you have to talk it over real deep. But this happens when something has to be done in a certain situation and nobody does anything. Whistleblowing happens when no action is taken on an important matter. So I think even though we can disagree on the method, obviously there was something serious here. For months, we've been hearing the Prime Minister saying, there's nothing. I was not briefed. There's nothing to worry. And then we read about the allegations, and suddenly there's that rapporteur that's being put in place. I think that people should be worried, first of all, because there's so many things we don't know. I can understand there are security matters that won't be revealed to the public, but at this point, we know nothing, and we are really worried.
Rachel Blaney, what's your reaction to what was published this afternoon?
Well, it was a very interesting read, to say the least. And I think some of the parts that I really took away was the fact that this whistleblower said repeatedly, this cannot become an us and them issue. And that's been my worry through this whole process, is this continued heat. You know, we're hearing the Prime Minister saying, well, the Conservatives are doing this and this is all they care about. We're hearing things from the Conservatives that are really about focusing only on fear and acting like there's nothing that we can trust, when we know that our political institutions, our democratic institutions, are things that we can trust, and that in this circumstance, we have to see more so that our trust is built, because now Canadians are getting concerned. So I think it's really important to listen to the whistleblower, to honor this process. And of course, I'm going to keep coming back to this. We need a public inquiry. Canadians need to understand what the process is. You know, yesterday I also listened to previous Mayor Kennedy Stewart from Vancouver, and he talked about his meeting with CSIS. Like, people are hearing all of these things and they're feeling a lack of trust in their systems. So I hope that all political parties can come back to this main focus, which is, as a country, how do we make sure that our systems are strong? How do we build continuous trust and belief? And what do we need to do proactively to correct things that are obviously seriously problematic, and not sort of tear each other apart just for partisan points? And that's what I'm worried about through this process. It is becoming far too partisan and not focused on Canadians, and it should be.
Mr. Noormohamed, when we spoke to Kennedy Stewart yesterday, he said in the run-up to the municipal election in Vancouver, where you are an MP, that two CSIS agents sat him down and told him foreign interference was happening in the election, and that they talked to him because they were getting frustrated with running it up the chain and nobody getting it done. Now, I don't know if the whistleblower was in that meeting, but it's the same message in this piece as they delivered a couple of years ago or last year to Kennedy Stewart. I mean, what should Canadians take from that in terms of how serious the political machinery of the country takes national security?
Well, again, I go back to the fact that nobody is disputing the outcome of the elections. I think that's really important to note, right?
But the next one is, I think, what people are worried about, right?
Exactly, and I think this is where, as Ms. Blaney said and others have said, it's really important for us to remove the partisanship from this. This has to be about national security. National security should not be a political football. So when we start to think about the role of the rapporteur in coming back to Canadians with very clear, very thoughtful direction as to what the government should do, no one should dispute those recommendations. And in fact, our government has said we're going to accept them. And so I think it's important now to let the work be done. If the rapporteur comes back and with recommendations that include an inquiry, then that's absolutely where we need to go. But I think we need to dial down the political temperature on this and let people who are experts in this do their work.
I'm casting no aspersions on David Johnston when I ask this question in terms of his character as a person and as a Canadian. But did the Prime Minister making a mistake picking somebody who describes himself as a lifelong friend of the Trudeau family and who is a member of the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation? Like, whatever you think of David Johnston, this is a difficult position for him to be in right now.
Well, he accepted the role knowing what he had done in the past and what his previous offices were. Stephen Harper, Prime Minister Trudeau, both have described him as the best of Canada. Stephen Harper's former Director of Communications described him as unimpeachable. You have the former campaign director of the Conservative, Fred Delory, saying that there's no one better to do this job. So I would argue that there is indeed no one better to do this job, and we are in a position now where we have an eminent Canadian whose reputation, as you've rightly said, is one that is indeed unimpeachable, and we need to make sure that that person has the ability to do their job without being torn down. I mean, we have gotten into this situation, unfortunately, where some have chosen just to tear down individuals. We saw this happen with Rouleau. We saw this happen with Morris Rosenberg, and now we're seeing with David Johnson. It's really a dangerous path to be going down.
Ms. Villemure, what is your sense of how David Johnson has been treated and defined since being announced as a special rapporteur?
Well, first of all, that's going to be a hard road to fill, that's for sure. We've been asking for a public and independent inquiry, and that's still what we're asking for. We want to have an inquiry where the rapporteur will be chosen by the House of Common MPs, not by somebody that's unfortunately has clear links to the Trudeau family. Now, these links do not remove his competence, but it's a shadow. It brings a shadow on the conversation, and I don't think it's a good idea just to start with. First of all, I would not have chosen Mr. Johnson because of that. I'm not talking about his competence. He's good. He did great service to the country, but I think that somebody has to be independent. The process has to be transparent and public. Without that, the trust that we're all trying to build, and I agree, this should be over partisanship, but that trust cannot be fully restored when there's a shadow over the inquiry.
Rachel Blaney, when we spoke Wednesday, I think it was, this week has moved fast. You said you were content with this appointment. Given everything that's come out since, are you still content with David Johnson as the appointment to the Office of Special Rapporteur?
I'm still content. You know, I said very clearly in the interview that we had on Wednesday, and I'll say it again, we want to see the outcomes. I don't agree with my Liberal friend. We will be watching what he presents to Canadians very carefully. And depending on what that looks like, we may be critical. I don't think it's ever appropriate to say that we shouldn't have some critical thought about what's happening. But more than that, you know, this is a person that was appointed by a Conservative government, has done a lot of work that is important, and knows that he is in a spotlight in a very specific way. And Canadians want results. And we do believe, you know, it was the NDP who brought forward the motion proc, who our leader was the initial leader to call out for a public inquiry. We certainly hope that's the direction, because Canadians need to see a process unfold that is independent, that is transparent, and allows them to build faith with their institutions. And I really appreciate, you know, that we've heard again and again that what's happened hasn't impacted past elections. And I agree. I've read enough to see that that's the result. However, what is happening right now is building distrust in Canadians, and we don't know what it's going to mean in the future, because we're seeing more and more stories come forward that build concern. So let's get to a public inquiry. Let's get to a process that Canadians can observe and know, and let's respect national security, but make sure that Canadians have faith in our process and our democratic institutions. And until that's done, I don't think that we're ever going to get out of this. And we need to, because the more partisan it becomes, the more toxic it becomes, the more fearful our country becomes, and that isn't good for anybody.
Taleeb Noormohamed, just as a final point, I know you can't speak for the Special Rapporteur, and I know you're not speaking for the Prime Minister, but in your gut, do you think we go through this process without David Johnson recommending a public inquiry or a judicial review or an independent mechanism of some sort?
Well, I don't want to prejudge it, and I'll tell you why. I worked with Bob Rae on the Air India review before the inquiry. So we went into that process with a clear mandate and a clear set of outcomes we were going to try and achieve. Whatever we didn't know at the end of that what we were going to recommend. And we did recommend a very focused inquiry at the end. So I don't know. And I think it's important for us to go into this not knowing what Mr. Johnson is going to recommend, but that we acknowledge the work that he's going to do and then take those recommendations. So I truly don't know, and I don't think it's fair for us to prejudge what the outcome of that work is going to be.
Okay, I want to thank you all for joining me, and thank you for waiting so we could get that important update on the situation in Edmonton. Taleeb Noormohamed, Rachel Blaney, René, Villemure, thank you so much. Again, we asked for a Conservative MP to join this panel, but no one was made available. Thank you all for taking the time. Okay, let's turn back to our top story. The anonymous source behind the Globe and Mail's reporting on Beijing's alleged election meddling is speaking out. It's important to note the identity of the individual remains unknown as the Globe continues to grant this national security official anonymity. In an opinion piece published in the last 2 hours, the official says it was lack of serious action by top government officials on the issue of foreign interference that led this official to leak top secret documents. The piece reads in part, I hoped that by providing the public with information I believe to be in the interest of all Canadians, we as a country will begin a much deeper conversation about what it is that we expect of our government. While I still believe that conversation to be necessary, it has unfortunately become marked by ugliness and division. So let me be clear. As troubling as the revelations we have seen are, I do not believe that foreign interference dictated the present composition of our federal government, nor do I believe that any of our elected leaders is a traitor to our country. Let's get some more reaction. Artur Wilczynski is a former Assistant Deputy Minister at the Communications Security Establishment. He's now a Senior Fellow at the University of Ottawa's Graduate School of Public and International Affairs. So Artur, you've had a chance to read this piece. What's your reaction to what you read in the Globe?
I have. So the person who wrote the Globe and Mail op-ed piece started off by saying that they swore an oath. They did. They swore an oath to uphold the laws of this country. They swore an oath to secrecy if they are an intelligence practitioner. They broke those oaths. And the most charitable thing that I can say about them is that they're naive beyond words. But truly what I actually feel is a sense of betrayal. Now, I feel that as a former colleague, as a former intelligence practitioner, and as a Canadian. They have not helped us. They have not helped Canada. They have not helped Canadian democracy. They have profoundly damaged it.
Okay, so they obviously knew what they were doing, though, right? Because this person writes that, can I do this while mitigating the risk to our country's sources and methods? Will this mean the end of my career? Who will take care of my family if I go to prison? So they clearly knew what was at stake for them as an individual, but felt, because of lack of action, as they say, by the government to take this seriously, the need to do this. You shrugged. Why?
I shrug. Why? Because I think that, again, I go back. That's one of the most naive things that I've read is that that they were very much focused on their own interpretation of events. They looked at this very much through, in my opinion, a narcissistic lens about how do they help advance things. Like I say, look, as someone who's been in government for 3 decades, who served conservative, liberal governments, are there times when you are profoundly frustrated by the decisions that government takes? Absolutely. It happens all the time. But there's a reason why we swear these oaths. Why I swore an oath to perpetual secrecy is because we understand the consequences of our actions if these things become public. And I think that, again, I go back to the naive part. If this person did not understand the consequences of this kind of disclosure on the political system, then they had a fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of the Canadian democracy, the status of partisanship in a minority parliament, and they have in fact made it more difficult for us to have a rational, deliberate, effective conversation on how to actually manage the national security risks posed by the foreign interference of the People's Republic of China in Canada at all levels of government. The tone has really shifted over the past number of weeks, and it has shifted in an unhelpful and unproductive way, in my opinion. It has taken away our ability to actually be more effective in finding who's involved, finding effective ways to mitigate their actions, and to, again, protect Canadian democracy in a responsible way. I just can't help but think that this is a more very highly irresponsible action. Illegal if it gets proven before a court, which is something that this person did not give the benefit of the doubt to the individuals who they released information of into the court of public opinion. And again, I go back to say I actually think it's quite narcissistic of them.
Well, this, to be clear, this person would have been the source for the Globe and Mail's reporting, not the Global News reporting. At least that is the impression we are given in this piece today. So we have to separate what the various media outlets have reported. But to go back to your point that it makes it harder to deal with this. Whoever this person is, a national security official, says the decision to blow the whistle, in their words, comes after years of inaction and after evidence of senior public officials ignoring interference was beginning to mount. I think a lot of Canadians might read that and be alarmed that someone draws that conclusion and took these actions. How do you react to that?
I believe that's untrue. It doesn't bear the fact in terms of my personal experience working within the system and working within the system for many years. Look, public service works slowly. There's no doubt about that. And I understand frustration, and I've felt it myself. But there are mechanisms whereby one channels that frustration in a productive way to ensure that our views are heard, that things get done. And things have been getting done. Things have changed a lot over the course of the past number of years in terms of institutions of government that have been far more focused on the specificity of this threat than have been in the past. And to say that nothing has been done and that no one has listened is profoundly untrue. And I mean, I can't go into the details because, again, I respect my oath of office and my oath of secrecy, because I think that that's what it means to be a public servant in a democracy with the rule of law. But I know firsthand that there has been robust action on the part of both national security, intelligence, and other institutions across the government of Canada to respond specifically to this threat. Is it happening at the pace that this person would like to see? Probably not.
Right.
But again, I go back to the fact that it is not up to them to make that call. That is why we have, again, the rule of law that constrains our actions in order to make sure that we remain accountable to the people that have trusted us to take on these roles on their behalf.
But that's why we have whistleblowers, right? Sometimes is institutions aren't acting and the legal framework around which they are forced to operate in is too restrictive, and there's no avenue for them to pursue their frustration.
I have a very different definition of a whistleblower. I think a whistleblower is someone that comes forward to disclose wrongdoing, the breaking of law on the part of the institutions that they're blowing the whistle for.
Fair.
A whistleblower, my interpretation, is not someone who thinks, the system isn't moving as quickly as I'd like it to move, therefore I'm going to try and accelerate this on my own initiative to see what happens.
Okay.
I think a whistleblower, and so I don't see this as whistleblowing at all.
Gotcha. I don't mean to interrupt you. We're just getting tight on time because I'm running out of show, Artur. So I just want to get another question in. Clearly, whoever wrote this is not alone in this. Kennedy Stewart, the former mayor of Vancouver, said he was briefed about foreign interference in the municipal election out there by a couple of CSIS agents who said they were frustrated with a lack of action up the chain. And now, because of these leaks, we know about the activities at the Beijing consulate, for example, in Vancouver. I mean, aren't these things Canadians deserve to know that they weren't hearing from politicians and the national security apparatus until now?
So again, I'll dispute some of the premise of that. I think that the fact that the former mayor of Vancouver was getting briefed on issues and acknowledges that in the public domain is part of the efforts of the national security intelligence community to engage with actors right across the system to ensure that they're aware and that they all have the ability to take appropriate action. Right. I think that again, what this person and other persons maybe have done is not totally understand the entire system as it operates. And I think that there's a lack of understanding on their part, both in terms of how things are moving within national security and intelligence, but also how the political system in Canada works and what the role is of political parties, of Elections Canada, of a whole range of actors that need to be engaged to appropriately manage this. Taking this on one's own shoulders, again, I think is just a betrayal on the part of this person, of the thousands of Canadians that work within the security and intelligence community, that work within the elections apparatus to keep our institutions safe, because they felt that the rest of us weren't moving quickly enough. And I don't particularly think that that is an ethical behavior at all.
Okay, Artur Wilczynski, I'm going to guess we're going to have you on again next week. You and Stephanie Carvin will probably be back on the show. But I'm out of time now, so I have to end the conversation now. I have a lot more I want to ask you, but the show it ends at 7 Eastern. That's all I can do about it. So listen, thanks for joining us now. We really appreciate your time. That's Artur Wilczynski joining us tonight.